Um, so when Katie and I were working, I've been supporting Katie on this. We were talking about like things that could help ground us before we start jumping into this communication. And what came up was what are our current ways of communicating? And what do our current ways of communicating look like? So we kind of like, we're just like brainstorming and we came up with this list because then we started looking at traditional ways in which we communicate. So through Indigenous storytelling, we have this very circular understanding about how looking at theory of change and how we're ever evolving and fluid. So looking at how all things are interconnected and how we're related to all of that. So looking at all of our relations as well. Um, Indigenous storytelling and Indigenous ways of communicating, it uplifts the power of oral history and Indigenous ways of sharing. So our ways of communicating aren't necessarily through text based all the time. It's also through the way that we do gift giving. It's the way that we have ceremony. It's the way that we sit and share with our elders and our families and have tea, eat food, have feasts together. All of those things are ways that we communicate and show it's also that way in which we share our knowledge with one another. It's very reciprocal. Whenever we go and see an elder and we ask for guidance or we want to know the stories, we want to know our sacred stories, there's always that gift giving that we give in reciprocity. Whenever we go out onto the land, there's also that reciprocal relationship as well. Um, and in our ways of knowing, it decenters humans. We talk about all of our relations. So when we're looking at our communication strategies, we're wondering how are we also elevating those voices of the four-legged, of the crawlers, of the flyers, of the water, as well as ourselves. But we're noticing that we do center humans in climate crisis. It upholds the narratives of duty to stewardship. And it's also this like humbleness. So uplifting that ancestral knowledge and thinking about that 7 generations. We're not always just stuck in the present. We're constantly thinking 7 generations behind us and 7 generations ahead. So how are we acknowledging that in our communication strategy as well? We work in good relation, so reconciling the harm towards Mother Earth and understanding how that relationship is so interconnected to who we are as Indigenous people. This extractive, this extractiveness that we have in society right now, not just through through resource extraction, we see that so evident within like our own communities. And like when we're talking with Angel, she was talking about some of her experiences in Egypt and like this like fear of being a woman in Egypt and like this like military like occupation and stuff like that. So understanding how this extraction of oil from the earth is creating arthritis in a lot of our people. The pollution of the water is creating cancer, and we can see like these direct correlations between what we're doing to the earth, this extractive nature, and how it's impacting our bodies physically. Also, on a societal level, when we think about our first relationship to our first mother, and the relationships that we see with women today, and how that is so interconnected. So how are we also uplifting those teachings and understandings? Um, it also uplifts our land and personal sovereignty and is informed by intersectional wisdom, so past, present, and future. We're adaptive and we are also accountable to not only those 7 generations past and future, but to the earth now and to all of those ones that we are uplifting. I was actually having a conversation with an elder a couple days ago, and it was like, um, in all of our stories, we have all of these stories about how the animals stood up for us, like that muskrat, the eagle, the wolf, all of these animals that stood up for humans when we needed help. And right now we're seeing these animals and these flyers, the water, and all of these ones that right now are so voiceless. And how are we as humans going to stand up for them in that way that they have stood up for us? So in contrast, looking at colonial ways of storytelling, it's very linear and binary focused. It only uplifts the written word and it's heavily text-based. It's very extractive, it's human-centered, commodity and capital focused, superiority, domination narratives. It also has a loss of connection to the land, subtracts the value of kin, and continues narratives of exploitation of land. It's also about ownership, who owns this knowledge. It's founded in colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacist ideology. It's inaccessible for our communities because of the academia jargon, and the hidden history, so loss of language and forgotten histories within that. So reciprocity in communications. So we're looking at this extractive relationship with Mother Earth that models our relations with each other, recognizing when our practices are not rooted in reciprocity. So we want to consider how our communications plan is impacted by our role as an organization, navigating inside capitalism while envisioning and strategizing ways to shift our efforts outside of these systems. And how can we incorporate healing justice in our efforts to share our collective story? So Katie came up with like these really amazing reflective questions during each of these parts. So the reflective question for this section is, what could decentering humans in our communications look like? And how can we ensure we are in reciprocity and in connection with land throughout our work? And you can just let this settle in, JC. I know you're still having your coffee.
Yeah, one of the conversations Ashley and I had was just talking about how it's like important, or that I've been thinking about too, just like in building this communication strategies, thinking about like we're kind of like in this weird place as an organization where we're like both building a communication strategy within a colonial structure, but also trying to like navigate outside of that structure. So how can our communications like reflect that also was, I think, really important for us. And also recognizing that these sessions themselves are extractive because we're extracting information from you right now. So just like recognizing that as well. But yeah, wanting to just like be thoughtful about the ways we've like, colonial history has always told stories, and how those like stories and narratives have impacted us now and impact the way that even we is so deeply ingrained. It impacts many things. So I think it was like just important for us to sort of like touch on this, and sort of be thinking and be thoughtful about, as we build our communication strategy, what does it look like to decenter humans and be in better relation with the land through our communications. So yeah, moving on. Thank you, Ashley, for holding that.